hello, 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 you amazing friends. This is your pal, Edward Zia speaking, live streaming with the legendary TEDx guru and international speaker, Karim Boktor. Karim, how are you tonight?
Amazing, mate. Fantastic. I'm just glad to be home.
Now, for a lot of you that know Karim, you would have seen Karim gallivanting right across the planet, from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere. And for those that would be seeing Karim for the first time, we're going to hear his story about what he's been up to and some of his great wins. Now, for those that don't know Karim, especially Karim's an amazing business and transformation coach. He's done a lot of work with me and a lot of people in our community, and he's an absolute pro. Now, Karim, and by the way, if you just come in, smash that like, share, and comment. Karim, tell us all about how did you pick up this TEDx gig? How did you wind up in California? And tell us the whole story.
So it was about 12 months ago, and someone approached me on Facebook saying, "Hey, dude, I really like what you're doing. It's different. I really like your message. Have you ever thought about talking about it on stage?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I didn't really understand. So we had a chat. The guy that approached me is like a 2 times TEDx guy, 2 million views, and he scouts for people. And I'm like, "Dude, I'm not a speaker. I hate speaking. I'm terrified of speaking to people, let alone in public." And he's like, "Well, have you thought about TEDx?" I'm like, "Dude, I'm not a TEDx speaker. Are you crazy?" And then I'm like, "Oh, I'll think about it." I was like way too scared. Like it just wasn't me.
Yeah.
And then I remember sitting on the couch. I remember saying to Alex, which is my wife, I said to her, "What's the craziest thing that I can dream for or aspire to be or do? Right? That I've wanted to do, but I just think this isn't me." And I said to myself, "Well, it's this TEDx thing, right?" So I went back to the guy and I'm like, "Okay, well, let's do it." And I didn't know how, I didn't know anything else, but all I just needed to do was decide that I was going to go for it. And it's not guaranteed. Like he just takes people on, he trains them up on speaking. Anyway, so we went through exercises. He really broke me down. Half the time I was in fetal position because I couldn't do what he says, and I couldn't, I was just saying to myself, "This is just too hard. This is just too hard. I can't do it. I'm not a speaker." So many times I just wanted to give up. Anyway, time went past, and I just kept practicing and practicing. And he'd said, "Dude, you've been picked up by TEDx." And I just like I didn't believe it at the time, and I still don't believe it until it gets published. It's like it hasn't happened.
Maybe this is like a movie. Maybe you dreamt this all when you wake up.
Honestly, that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
So as he was telling me, he goes, "Dude, jump on. I've got a surprise." And I sort of knew what it was going to be about, but as he was telling me, like it's like I wasn't there. It's like this isn't happening. This isn't me. And like I was just like I couldn't be present in accepting that I was picked up by TEDx. And
Just want to jump in there on that one, because it's funny you say this, tragically funny, because, and I know obviously this is a transformation we're going to talk about, because I have a different view of you than the old view of yourself that you're presenting, because again, to give some context to everyone, Karim runs our business networking meetup in Melbourne. We run at the Pullman Melbourne Park, one of Melbourne's most expensive hotels. And Karim, you'll get up in front of 50 or 60 people like a pro. So it's funny you say that you're terrified of speaking, where I have seen you in front of 50 people running networking events. So
this is recently, but prior to that, I was like, "Oh my gosh, like who wants to hear from me? Who wants to listen to me?"
Yeah. Where did this viewpoint come from? Because I'm obviously, congratulations on conquering your past. Where did you form this viewpoint? Because I'm amazed you. And it's not your fault. I'm amazed you.
So part of the reason why TEDx picked me up because of my story. So as a child, parents had to leave Egypt because they were being persecuted. So I came to Australia with a whole lot of baggage already at the age of
Yeah.
2.
Yeah.
On top of that, I had a severe stutter going into school,
Mm.
and the kids just decided that they didn't want to be my friend, and because I was the Egyptian guy, I was dark, I had
Yeah.
a stutter, they didn't want to like me, and because I had a stutter, the teachers didn't know what to do. The teachers thought that I couldn't speak English.
Yeah.
It wasn't that I
Whereas,
couldn't speak English; it's because I just didn't want to speak out of being afraid of being humiliated all the time. And, plus I didn't want the other person waiting 5 minutes for me to finish a sentence, right?
mm,
So I just chose not to speak, but they
mm,
thought that I couldn't speak English.
mm,
So it was from that moment that I decided that I was terrified of speaking because every time I spoke, the kids would laugh at me.
mm.
I was constantly judged and all that kind of thing. So whatever I could, I would try not to speak. Even
Yeah.
I remember even into my teens, right? Um, into my teens, I was overweight. I was 40 kilograms overweight.
Didn't they?
I was living at home with mum and dad,
Yeah.
right? Even into my late 20s, 30s, I was balding. I was George Costanza with a
Oh,
stutter.
I was balding. I joined the army when I was 19, and people were making fun of me for balding when I was 22. So
Yeah,
I balded very early, as you can tell.
yeah. So, yeah, man, I was George Costanza with a stutter. So I
Wow.
was always on the back
Really?
foot, right? So
So you spent a lot of your life George Costanza with a stutter. I get it. So you spent because I suppose what makes this conversation quite surreal is the difference in viewpoint. Because, like, as far as I'm concerned, you're this charming, charismatic, handsome Arab guy that helps all these people achieve transformations. You run big meetups at one of Melbourne's most expensive hotels, right? Um, and your backstory is like the antithesis of that. So it's just such a wacky backstory, and it's incredible how you've done the full 180 degrees. And bravo
yeah,
to you.
yeah. That's part of the story, right? It's like you're a stutterer, you're overweight, you had
Yeah.
really low self-esteem, no confidence, you were scared of speaking. And literally, like what you just said, it's like I've done the backflip. People
Mm.
are like, "You're not the Karim that I remember." Like, people are like, "Dude, what happened to you?"
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. As in positively, not as in, you know,
Positive,
yeah, as in,
positive.
what the, how'd you do that? How'd you, I
Yeah,
suppose
yeah.
the question we're all thinking is, how'd you, like, was there a particular moment where you decided a change? Was there a chain of events? How did the actual events flow that led you in this direction?
So, I went through my own stuff, hence why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I was running my own business and nothing was working and everything was just going in the pits.
Hmm.
It was like the harder that I worked, the more that I sank. And it was like I was running on this hamster wheel.
Hmm.
Nothing was working. And I found myself like, and I was ticking all the boxes, right? I had done my MBA, I had run businesses in the past. My wife had just given birth to our firstborn. So it was a really tough and challenging time for me as a father. I felt like a failure, not
Hmm.
only as a father, but as a husband.
Hmm.
And I found myself just collapsing, just breaking down. My business was going south. And then someone tapped me on the shoulder, and I went through like this journey of looking within myself and understanding what was actually going on.
Hmm.
And there were a lot of beliefs, limiting beliefs that I had inside me. There's a lot of trauma from my childhood, from when I was at school, and kids not wanting to be my friend. I felt like I was never liked. I was never deserving. And so a lot of these things, right, that I had never explored in the past, probably because I thought that this was just me, it was my identity. A part of it was probably too painful to look into. right? And I didn't want to go there,
Mm.
but I had no other choice. And I didn't want to pass on all these beliefs and all these limiting behaviors and baggage to my son.
Mm.
I know that's, like, that's how it works. It's this generational cycle that people keep going through, and we
Mm.
see it all the time. And I just put my foot down and I said, well, this isn't going to happen to my son. I'm going to bring him up better. But first, I need to lead. I need to
Yeah.
show him that I can do it myself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting actually because when when I was younger, I used to be a chronic nail biter. Not anymore, I don't bite my nails anymore, but I used to be a really bad nail biter at one point. And interestingly, I caught my daughter today biting her nails as we walked home from schools, and I'm like, no. And I said to her, "Don't you bite your nails? Like I did that. Stop it." And I agree with you. It's a whole generational trauma thing, isn't it? We, as much as we may love or hate our parents, we get all their positive, negative traits. And I suppose the choice is how many of those negative traits do we want to pass on to the next generation?
Yes. Yeah. And it's even like, just like you said, like even if we grew up thinking, I'm never going to be like that,
Yeah.
right? Referring to a trait from our parents, most often than not, we have the same trait and we don't even realize it
Mm.
because it's in our unconscious, and it's the place that people don't even know that exists.
Mm.
It's a blind spot, right? So it's a really interesting concept, that once you see it, you can't unsee it. So yeah, so that was my journey into my transformation, and it's been quite a journey, man.
So,
And I
so
can
I
see
can
you as well,
imagine.
'cause you went through your own journey too, Edward, didn't you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, my journey's been pretty crazy. You know quite a bit of it, right?
Yeah.
And I
Mm.
remember a recent turning point. And now, to some people, this is going to sound absolutely stupid, but to some people, they're going to get it, right? But to me, so when I was 29 and 30, I was a washed up homeless veteran, right? Living in my car, right? I came to Sydney. Like any immigrant does, homeless veteran living in his car, right? So there we go. So came to Sydney, didn't know anyone. Just really, my life just started, just here to start again. And what was interesting is you know, 10, 15 years later, I was sitting on a business class flight, to Melbourne, actually to your city to run a meetup. And I actually got a little bit emotional because it's sort of like, yeah, I've come a long way in the past decade, right? And it's interesting because the thing that I found fascinating, and obviously no wonder we get along, where our stories are very similar, is in both of our stories of going from, you would say, zero to hero, or the turnaround, or however you want to frame it, you and I never had any big wins. It wasn't like it's not like we got into a movie co-starring of Russell Crowe and then we made millions of dollars, right? Right? It wasn't like, you know what I'm trying to say, right? It wasn't like we were losers and all of a sudden Russell Crowe spotted us in the street and we were in a futuristic cop sci-fi film with them. That never happened, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And what I noticed that's very similar about our stories is our turnarounds has been the result of many, many little wins. Yes,
Yes.
granted, you got a big break with TEDx and Bravo, which I'll come back to, right? But
Mhm.
I think the key point is that our turnarounds have been from a series of little wins. What do you think of that, Karim? Am I understanding things correctly or not?
100%, man. It's like death but not death. It's like living
Definitely.
by 1,000 paper cuts.
Life with a thousand band-aids. There we go.
Yes, yes, right? It's like all these little things that add up, like all these miniature bricks that you're building, and you're thinking, oh, it's not going to really make a difference. But by the time you know it, you've built something, right? And you don't even realize it, and you look back to where you've come from. You're like, wow, I've actually come a long way. Just micro steps. Just keep walking. You're totally
Yeah.
right, man.
And then you have big breaks like Karim flying to California to do his TEDx, right?
Yeah.
So did you go on your own or did you take your family? Just pardon me.
Dude. So yeah, which I floated the idea with my wife. She was like,
Yeah.
not happening. it's just too hard with the kids. And she's like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't do it to you. Like you wouldn't. And come to think of it, luckily that she convinced me not to take everyone, because I didn't leave the hotel for 2 weeks. So I went there 2 weeks earlier.
Okay.
Um,
Where'd you
and I
stay?
was
Hotel. What hotel did you stay at?
quite different ones. We stayed at the Hyatt. I stayed at some Airbnbs. I stayed at some random ones, just whatever.
Okay. So you bounced around LA, staying in a bunch of different cool places.
Not only in LA, like in the whole, like I went to Auburn, I went to Alabama, I went to Texas, I went
Oh God.
to um, Atlanta. So I did all these states, thinking that I'm actually going to see it, like, get out of the hotel and see it. But I was just too um, bought into the TEDx speech, that as soon as I woke up every morning, I would rehearse and I'll practice
Uh,
and practice and practice and refine and practice up until I went to sleep.
whilst you traveled to all these cool places, you were just in work mode. Is that it? You were just
I was in work
work.
mode. I couldn't switch off. I couldn't, just enjoy the moment, because this thing was just too much for me. And there was too much on the line. Like, I had left my family and I had, like, put a lot on the line to make this work. So I really had to, like, I couldn't leave, to go see that. Like, looking back at it now, I should, because it's done, right? But yeah, I didn't see anything. The only thing
I
that I
get it.
saw, yeah,
I get it, because you're in Texas. Yeah, you can go. You can go put on a rodeo hat, put on a cowboy hat, and take selfies and go, "I'm the Arabian cowboy,"
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Just don't climb Brokeback Mountain. Wink, wink. But just watch out for that. Watch out for Brokeback Mountain, friend. But what I was going to say is, but I get it though. I get it. You're more in work mode. You're thinking, oh, I suppose I gotta nail this TEDx talk or I fail
Yeah.
my mission. So I get it. You had that big, I hate to say it, but weight around your neck that,
Mm.
I get it. I get it. And so what was it like? So where did you actually do the TEDx? Was it back in California? Where did you actually do that performance?
Yeah, it was in California.
Yeah.
So I flew back to California towards the end of my trip. And yeah, man, did it in California.
Mm. And I was going to ask you, when you spoke, 'cause I was in front of hundreds of people and all that, I saw the photos. What was your anxiety levels like? So you're I don't know if you're sitting in the green room or whatever, or the purple room, right? But you're on in 10 minutes. What was going through your head? Like, were you about to have an aneurysm? Were you about to have a heart attack? Were you about to pass out?
I
Did
was,
you just not care?
yeah, man. Even from the night before, I was like, oh my gosh, I was like hyperventilating, because I was thinking to myself, I'm gonna forget my lines. Like, I'm gonna forget everything that I've been practicing for the last 12 months. It all comes down to these, 15 minutes. So that night, I remember waking up at I remember sleeping at like 12, waking up at 3 a.m., couldn't sleep. Um, you know, jumping, and then it was my turn to jump on, and it was just, mate, I was so nervous.
What was the first moment? So I guess you came out from behind the curtain. You saw these hundreds of people looking at you. You got as the guy's done this many times. You got the light in your face, so you can't see anything. What was the first feeling in your body? Were you like, hey,
Well, they always
someone?
tell you, just remember your first line, because you're gonna like, if you freeze up, just at least remember your first opening line, because it's going to open you up. And then everything else, just trust that you've been practicing and that you've been training for that moment, so you don't freeze up. But then as well, like, just be yourself, because people don't like you sounding like a robot.
Mm, mm,
And that also takes less stress from you as well.
mm.
So it's just, you don't have to. The one thing that really helped me, like the one thing that really helped me with this is that I didn't have to say the words, but like I didn't have to memorize my speech verbatim, word for word. They actually tell you not to because you won't
Yeah.
connect with the audience. So when I did that and when I just let go, I knew the topics and I could just be myself and I just didn't have to remember. I just had to have a conversation with with everyone else.
Mm.
So yeah, so that helped heaps.
Yeah, I suppose it makes sense because if you rehearse it a lot, you're going to sound like Kevin Costner, right? It's just going to sound like you're going to. It's just going to sound like you're reading a script, right? And people
Yes.
are going to think,
Yeah.
it's
Not
just
personable. It's not
yeah,
like, I can read a script type of thing.
yeah, yeah, again, yeah. No one wants to sound like Kevin Costner, right? No one
No,
wants that, right?
no, no.
Um, you know, but I think it's amazing I suppose the psychological barriers in yourself you must have broken because I suppose and obviously spoiler alert here, but you did a great job. It came out. Um, this whole experience has definitely elevated your personal brand. You're definitely not the same guy coming in. When you were flying back to Australia, right? So you're flying back to Australia. You're sitting on your business class flight with your arms folded. Flying back to Australia, right? Eating nuts, drinking. I don't know, I'm just projecting onto you, right? I'm just projecting my experience onto you, right?
Yeah.
But you're going back. What were you thinking? What was going through your mind? Was it satisfaction? Was it like, are you feeling different? What was some of I suppose, the before Karim and the after Karim from this experience?
I think during that time, and I had someone actually inbox me. This is just a wave of emotion
Mm,
because when you're in that moment of constantly refining and you're constantly stretching yourself emotionally, because that's what you do. Like you're not just typing up like an essay type of thing. It's not like that. It's you're constantly putting like your heart on the piece of paper and you're constantly stretching this thing.
yeah.
And you got no
That-
time to like um you got no time to rest and to think, oh my gosh, I'm feeling sad or I'm feeling angry. You just have to keep going,
Yeah,
right?
you got no time to stop and process. You
You've got no
can't.
exactly, yeah, you've got no time to stop and process. And this
Yeah,
this thing's been going on for 12 months.
yeah.
So like even like just before the night, like all these more like there's more emotions. So when I'm on the plane, it's not like I'm thinking, yes, I did it, I've got it, I've arrived. It's actually more along the lines of just humbling like feelings of um like these waves of emotions come up,
Hmm.
right? But also like that you can do this. Like all those thoughts about thinking to yourself that you can't do this. Like every time my coach mentor kept asking me for more, and I kept saying, I don't have any more to give you. Like this is all I've got. Like I'm done. I always gave more.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of lessons here within myself that, and for anyone else speaking, is that what you think is the top of your mountain can sometimes be the base for another one, because every time you reach that, you think, or sometimes when you think that you can't reach it, most often than not, if you just keep going, that you actually can. So when I actually came back on that flight, the thing that I remember thinking most was my family.
Hmm.
Like nothing else mattered, and I just wanted to be home with my children, with my wife, and that's all that mattered.
Mm.
Like it was so like I didn't think that it would be like that. That I would be like, oh, okay, it'll be a good holiday just for myself, and it'll be good some time off. But it wasn't like that. It was like when I came home, I was with them for like 2 days, just holding them.
Yeah, it's like you returned from a military deployment
Yeah,
almost.
honestly, it was like
Yeah, I get it.
the
I get it.
government sent me off for a mission,
Yeah.
right? Leading up to that, I had practiced and trained for like 12 months, and like the survival of my family relies on
Mm.
this, being successful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's funny you say that. As a guy who's done a lot of, secret squirrel stuff in its time, I know what it's like when you have a high stress operation of some form, right? What should I say
Yeah.
here? But you go through a high stress situation, and then basically you're on the way back home, and you're not sitting there thinking that you're James Bond or anything. You're kind of thinking, yeah, I'm glad I survived / didn't get busted, right? Or that type of thing,
Yeah.
right? So, I get it. So what would be interesting is that it was kind of like, as a guy who's done this, it was kind of like psychologically, you're like someone getting home from deployment. You've left a high stress situation, and now
Yeah.
you're sort of, hey, I want to get back to my previous life.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
Yeah. And to add to it, like as soon as I finished on going on stage, I had a couple of hours, just to have a look at the city, blah blah blah. Anyway, so I went on the plane, and I was tired because I hadn't slept for like a week. I haven't slept properly,
Mm.
and I was sleeping on the plane, and we're on the tarmac, and the captain's like, guys, we're not leaving. Everyone has to deplane because
You're like, you were busy just entering cloud nine, and then that's happened to me. That and you're just getting into your flight. You're like,
yeah,
back
dude,
to
I had my like I had my blanket on, I had my like my eye patch. I was snoring,
Yeah.
and I'm like, no, and this is like 2 a.m.
Oh god, yeah. So that must have sucked. That's happened to me. Like I mean, I would say I'm a massive domestic flyer, so I don't fly to LA or Dubai. I'm not cool like you. I just fly up and down Australia like every bloody week, right? So I say to people, I tell this running joke. That's not a joke. I'm a platinum frequent flyer with Virgin, and a lot of people say to me, "Oh wow, like do you go to Dubai or the UK and stuff?" I said, "No, I just go to Brisbane and Melbourne every goddamn week, pretty much." So I've achieved frequent flight in the most boringest way, right? Most boringest way. I'm not the exotic international guy like you, and I find as guys been in that position, like you've had a long, whatever reason, you have a long ass day, good or bad. You're on the plane, you're all snuggling up, then you got to get off. That is just at 2 a.m. That would not be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it just got worse. So they wanted to put me into. So they put me into this hotel.
So recovery option, stuck you in a hotel overnight.
Put me in a hotel, but this hotel was like bad.
Oh
And I'm
god.
pretty resilient. Like I can stay in bad hotels. Like
Yeah.
I've done it, right?
Well, you're
This
from the
is
Middle East. I mean,
yeah, like
I don't
I'm
say,
bred I'm bred tough, right?
yeah,
This
you're,
wasn't
you're
even a
from.
hotel. This was like a motel. It's like the stuff they see in the movies. Like all that was missing was like the chalk outline of a dead body on the floor,
Gotcha.
and like weird as shit. Like my hotel room stunk like crap. Like it was just stinky. It was moldy. It was like gooey sock. It smelled like dirty socks. In the middle of the
That
night, I would hear banging on the
mildew,
door.
mildew hasn't been aired correctly. Yeah.
I'm like, man, I was gonna throw up.
Like Scarface almost. It reminds me of like one of the motels out of Scarface, the Al Pacino film.
Man, I've seen Scarface. They look cool, but this thing was like, no. And when I told people in and around LA, it was like, it's known, right? And they're like, no, they didn't put you there, right? But by then I was just tired. I just wanted to sleep. It was like 4 a.m. By the time I got into the hotel.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then I just ended up seeing LA for the next 2 days because my plane they couldn't get a flight out for me for the next 2 days.
Wow.
So I ended up just making the most of it, which was a blessing in disguise because, as I was saying before, I hadn't really seen anything. So it was a really good opportunity for me to go out and have a look at the country.
I am glad I agree the blessing in disguise remark, because if you got on that plane, you would have just gone home. At least you got a bit of LA, bit of post TEDx. You could chill out and actually enjoy a bit of LA.
100%. 100%. With me, whenever something happens, like I've trained myself I've trained myself to surrender.
Yeah.
Because whatever moment is happening, it's meant to happen.
Yeah.
And for me to make the most of it. So when that plane, when the captain said, whatever it is, everyone's got to get off.
So,
I was tired, but then in the back of my mind, I said, okay, what does LA have in store for me for the next 2 days? Type of thing. Because like in that moment, you've got a choice. You can either be angry at the world, that things didn't go your way, right? And and nothing changes.
Yeah.
You can be angry and nothing changes.
Yeah, no one cares if you're angry.
And live in the moment,
Yeah.
right? And be happy and just enjoy it. And I chose option B.
And that's very mature, putting on my frequent traveler hat, right? It's funny you say that, because I help a lot of people travel, right? I help a lot of people go around across Australia on meetups and all that, right? And some of them are frequent travelers, and some of them this actually happened to me the other day. One of our members came to me to our Brisbane meetup from Sydney, and to me, going to Sydney is like just catching a bus somewhere. It's just I do it all the time. And for them, they're like, Ed, I've never ever left my state. What? Right? So it was just fascinating. And I find when you're a frequent traveler, you have to really roll the punches. You have to really, otherwise you can't be you're not going to enjoy the traveling experience. I remember, I had to, the story. I'm just going to say this more just for the sake of the live stream. But you remember that funny time? So one time I flew to Melbourne for our meetup, right? The meetup you're running there. Great job, by the way. Anyway, Ed Sheeran was on, right? You know that time that Ed Sheeran was in town, just the whole of Melbourne was shafted, right? That guy, that carrot top destroyed our city, right? And what happened was, so I flew down, we had the meetup. The meetup was great job, by the way. And then what happened was, remember how my flight home got cancelled, right? I don't know if you remember. And it wasn't Virgin Airlines' fault. They could just not get me out. They said, because I was just trying to get back to Sydney, like 1.5 hour flight. And they're like, 1 hour 15. They're like, no, Ed, there's no flights back. We can't get you back till Sunday. What? Right? This is a Friday night. So what they did was they said, but we have a solution, Ed, if you bear with us. We're going to stick you in a nice hotel overnight, which they did. And so the next day, they flew me Melbourne to Brisbane business class. Then they threw me back. So literally, I actually saw Sydney. I literally, hello, Sydney. Hello, Sydney. Hello, Sydney. Right? Brisbane, 3 hours in Brisbane. Then they got me a business class flight back to Sydney. So I literally went all the way up Australia, hung out in Brisbane for a while, then went back home. So there you go. So it's funny how airlines and stuff like that works.
Yeah. Exactly. If you're not willing to, to go with the punches. Yeah, you got to roll with the punches, man.
Great metaphor for life. Now, Karim, we've been here for more than half an hour. I know it's late for you. I thank you for watching. We've got heaps of people. And for those watching, smash that like, share, and comment. Appreciate you, winners. Karim, I'd love to hear from you, just some closing thoughts from you, closing thoughts and advice to the audience. And please tell people how you help people and how they can get in contact with you. Tell us all about your coaching and what you do and your transformations.
So my closing thoughts would be, upon reflection, how you were asking me about your life, and your life doesn't have to be what people are telling you it's supposed to be, or what you believe because this is what you have decided that this is your identity. Like, you have the freedom to do whatever the hell you want to do.
Mm.
So that was one of my so that's what like that would be one of my closest thoughts, is that you decide when you say no, or
Mm.
when life doesn't want to give you anything.
So we have a lot more power than we think we do. Is that a fair paraphrase?
You own all the power. Like whenever you
Okay.
say, oh, like it's not my fault, or like it's the other person's fault because this happened, or look, everyone's got a story. Like the most successful people in life that hadn't, like the most billionaires that are living today, most of them, they're not generational. Like they've made their own money, and they've usually come from nothing. Like even look at Ed, like his story. He could have, just sobbed away and said, "Oh, but have you heard my story?" Like it doesn't matter. Like what do you want? Okay, I'm sorry that this happened to you,
Mm.
and I'm sorry that this is, but now we can use that to either like improve your life. Like you would have a lot of resilience because of that. Like
Mm.
what do you want? And once you own that power, and once you know that everything stops and starts with you,
Mm.
and the world is your oyster. And this is how I became to change people, because I was like it was that powerful for me.
Mm.
Like you can't just tell someone, hey, stop being an asshole, and
Mm.
they can be an they can stop being an asshole, because everything changes at an unconscious level,
Yeah.
right? So how do we get there? And this is what I do. So I help create change at an unconscious level through the Boktor method,
Mm.
which is like advanced hypnotherapy techniques.
Yeah.
Because most often than not, it's not a business problem; it's a you problem,
Mm.
and that's one of the hardest pills to swallow.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more, and you helped me a lot. So, and again, I say this with shame but honesty, but I have an eating disorder. I've always, for years, I've had problems with binge eating disorder, right? And I don't like it, but it is what it is. And you helped me a lot with my binge eating disorder. I get it, and it's funny because, for example, my binge eating disorder, I'm not an idiot. I consciously know it's bad, but why do I do it every now and then? You're right. It's the subconscious mind that takes over. So you are right. You're kind of like the person that hacks into one's mind and gets rid of all the bad code. I like it.
Yes.
There we go. There we go. And of course, as well, I'll say this one for you. People, of course, can add you on LinkedIn. Of course, they can add you on LinkedIn, can't they? LinkedIn.
Of course they can. Only the cool people can add me. So if you're cool, then you can add me.
Well, everyone watching this live stream, be it the recording or live, is cool. So that means you can add Karim. Yeah. And Karim's a great guy. Like, if you're, don't take my word for it, just listen to the live stream. But if you're after a transformation for your mindset and your life, definitely have a chat to Karim. So, Karim, thank you for spending your evening with us. I know you're a busy man. I know you only got back recently, but I thought I'd just grab you for this live stream while we can capture your raw wins in real time. So I just want to say a big thank you, Karim. It's an honor to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Ed. Really appreciate it, man.
Pleasure. Love your work, everyone. Like, share, comment. Appreciate you winners. Thank you, Karim. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Love your
guys.
work.